Hello, podcast listener. Have you ever wanted to know a lot about the internet and why the service to your rural area isn't there yet? Good news, we're going to touch on that plus so much more in this episode of JJ Meets World. Get out your HD DVDs and get ready for some podcasting. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Sometimes you're just not ready until you crack open that Pepsi.
I didn't even shake this thing, but it sure acted like I did.
Oh, I put it in my pants pocket when I was walking around, so it probably was getting flopped around a little bit.
You know, I think one of the Simpsons gags that still to this day murders me is Bart putting the beer in the paint shaker. And then when the mushroom cloud of beer happens and like Wiggum's like, call it in, and the guy's like, you know, Breaker, we need pretzels. I repeat, we need pretzels. I love that joke.
It's and he goes into a coma from it too. It's their April Fool's Day episode, which is a really good. So I actually belong to 4 Simpsons clip groups on Instagram.
Damn.
Where people post little sections. And I was just talking about one of my all-time favorite gags in The Simpsons is this great visual gag. And it's in the episode where Homer and Abe team up to sell the Simpsons tonic, which makes you really randy. And the kids think that their parents have turned into reverse vampires who have to be home before night. And that it's something from like the dinner industry to like try, or like the breakfast industry is trying to kill the dinner industry. But in it, at one point, Homer and Abe get into a big fight, and they both get separated, but they end up at the Simpson family farm, right? So where Homer grew up, and there's a great gag where they walk into the living room, and Abe goes, the old Radiation King, which is the name of their television. And he goes, you used to sit there and watch TV for hours. And it shows a little tiny, like Homer, like cross-legged. And the television has made this like shadow of Homer because of the lights flickering against the wall. And then it cuts back to them. And that shadow has been burned into, like it still exists. The shadow itself exists. And I remember as a kid really realizing how important sight gags were when it comes to comedy. Because sure, you can be incredibly witty with your banter, but a good sight gag never goes awry. Here's an example of one that was just recently brought to my attention. Someone was talking about how it was just the 25th anniversary of the first movie American Pie. Mm-hmm. They said you can tell a couple of reasons why it's the 25th, because Blink-182 has a cameo in it. Webcams were supposed to be massive.
That was brand new.
But so famously, and this is a spoiler alert, in the movie they talk about what it's like when you're able to let your fingers do the walking when you're hooking up with a lady. And one character says to another, it's like warm apple pie. I was too young at the time to really understand what they were talking about, but at one point, Jason Biggs has sex with a pie. Now, he doesn't take the pie up to his bedroom. He gets on top of their like tile-covered island in the kitchen, and then gets caught by his dad. If you're watching
the edit or the unedited version,
right?
The theatrical version, he's just standing there
holding it.
Yep. Yeah.
So it then cuts to Eugene Levy, who had a great career resurgence because of this film. And Jason Biggs is staring down his lap, and they're sitting at the kitchen table, and he goes, we'll tell your mother we ate it all. But the sight gag that you get is the pie is annihilated. It is just like, it is in a million pieces, and it's crumbled, and like there's higher points and lower points. And somebody just sent me a screenshot of that and said, I have never laughed so hard. I don't think I ever actually looked at the pie before. And then if you look at the pie and you look at the shame that Jason Biggs has on his face, I'm like, yeah, that's a great visual gag. That is just wonderful.
Yeah, it takes me back to a time and a place.
Right?
Yeah.
And they absolutely could not make that movie today.
You know what? I'm trying to remember how I went down this rabbit hole. I got home from the Ben Folds concert last night, and then I'm on YouTube because like you and I went out to Applebee's afterwards with our good friend and previous guest,
Randy Olson Heinold.
And she made the comment like, Tucker, you ate your food really fast. And I was like, you know what I did? Like, I mean, I usually eat my food fast, but I ate it even faster because I think I was so hyped up.
Faster than normal.
I think I was so hyped up on the adrenaline of seeing people and having a good time. I got home and I was like, I have to sit up for a couple hours so that I don't throw all this up in my sleep because I have to digest it.
Do you?
At some point, I came across a Limp Bizkit article, and I ended up reading the Wikipedia article for Limp Bizkit and actually watching their old like music videos. And it took me back to like I remember the summer when Nookie was the number one on TRL like every other week, and actually like as a kid liking the song because I didn't know what good taste was yet at that moment.
Yeah, sure.
I think that was the same summer that Bow at the Ba from Kid Rock was on the radio and other things like that, and it totally took me back to a crazy time and place in my life.
The era when that came out was also the era when people were just starting to experiment with Flash animation. And one of the things I love the most is someone did a cover like as Cookie Monster of Nookie, and I did it all for the cookie. What the cookie? And they used like cuts of him and then put like, tried to superimpose sunglasses over him. And it's amazing to me because like a kid could do a TikTok today that it's just 10 times, a million times even better than what we could have done at that era. But people poured their heart and soul. I remember someone did a Flash animation of Kyle's song, or Cartman's song, Kyle's Mom is a Big Fat Bitch, and they animated it themselves using Flash, and it probably took hours and hours. And this is at a time when there's no YouTube, so the only way you could get that video is if someone sent it to you in an email chain because they're like, this is so funny.
Or eventually it would get posted on either fugly.com or ebombsworld.com.
eBombsWorld.
This was the era of Napster, right?
Yep.
And so like there was even a concert series that Napster of Limp Bizkit that Napster put on because Fred Durst was actually advocating for file sharing at that time. And the first Flash animations that I really dug into was the ones making fun of Metallica, because Metallica came out hard against Napster and hard against file sharing, and that if you download our songs on Napster, you're not a real fan, fuck you, and all that kind of stuff. And the whole series was, I think, just called Napster Bad, where Lars Ulrich is this, or Ulrich, I can never remember if it's Ick or Itch, is the leader of the band, sort of leading the fight for it, and then James Hetfield is this monosyllabic sort of Sasquatch who can just say things like Napster bad, beer good, and that lit the internet on fire at that time. That was all Flash animated, and I remember thinking, I can't believe they can make cartoons on the internet now. That is so fucking cool. But like, I mean, the Napster days, thinking like, oh yeah, like, oh, in 2 hours, I'm going to have the whole, I'm going to have Seal's latest album, or I'm going to get this Ben Folds 5, rare song that I haven't been able to find before.
Do you remember like the story of Matt Stone and Trey Parker taking just a ton of money from?
Wait.
What was the entity?
It was but for Princess.
Like whatever the flat. What was the company that was all in on Flash?
I can't remember. I don't remember what it was called.
Oh, hold on.
Princess.
Okay, so Princess. I'm gonna let's play the theme. Because
Princess, here's a funny noise.
Princess is a Flash animation series by Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of South Park. The story follows a Lhasa Apso dog. On December 8th, 1999, Daily Variety reported that Parker and Stone were going to produce 39 shorts that were to be 3 to 5 minutes long. In January 2000, the duo announced that they would have full creative and artistic control of the series. The animated short was originally produced with Macromedia Flash in 2001 and was meant to be showcased on Macromedia's sister site, Shockwave. Stone and Parker never heard back from Shockwave after submitting the first 2 episodes. Parker stated that he and Stone would love to do more episodes if someone wanted to distribute them and encourage fans with Flash skills to continue the stories themselves. Okay, so the first episode is Princess Hears a Strange Noise, and it is as raunchy. The story centers around a cute, adorable little dog, but then things go awry. So this is this is the theme song to Princess.
Who's that fluffy bundle of love? It's Princess, Princess. Special little muffin, just as sweet and easy is. Princess, Princess. Run and jump, Princess. Princess duck and hide. Who's the one that tell me Rob? She cute as little baby is. Who loves adventure and plays all day? It's Princess, isn't it? Yes. Let's see what she does today. Today's episode, Princess hears a strange noise.
I loved the Princess, and it's only 2 episodes, right?
Yeah.
It's only 2 episodes, and I don't want to spoil anything. If you want to seek this out, it's on YouTube. It's all over the internet. You can find it. If you just search Princess Matt Stone or Trey Parker, you're going to find it instantly. And it's a great example of, we'll take your money.
Yep.
And you only want us because we've created this hot thing called South Park that everyone's watching. You really don't care about what we want to make or what we want to do. And I have always loved the screw you attitude that those guys have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It reminds me of, I think it was Pizza Hut hired Ween one time to make, it was either Pizza Hut or some other big chain, to make like a theme song. It must have been Pizza, but their stuffed crust cheese pizza. And they made a song called "Where the Motherfucking Cheese Go." I don't know. And it's just, where'd the cheese go? I don't know. And it's like a repetition of that over and over again. It made me think of. But this was the era. This was the Wild West. This was where you would download music on Napster and then play it on Winamp, which would say,
I love
this really slaps the llama's ass or something like that, right? They had some sort of like a phrase that would go with it.
And for those of you who are too young to know this, okay, it is how do I want to say this? Winamp is a player like you'd use Spotify or iTunes today, but it didn't save any information. So the second you close Winamp, if you had like 60 songs you had put together in a perfect playlist, you'd have to rebuild that playlist. Yeah,
eventually you could save the playlist in a separate file. You'd have to go open it and stuff. But basically it was what you would use to play music files that you had downloaded to your computer, right? iTunes didn't exist yet. Yeah, the streaming services, that was nowhere near. Podcasting didn't even exist at that point. And so that was very much the Wild West. But I remember too, like you could download custom skins for your Winamp.
Yep.
And man, that was a great time. It wasn't too much longer after that Homestar Runner became a big thing. I think Homestar Runner was probably the very first massive crossover series success that was purely web animated. That was utterly brilliant. And
it was good at promoting it. Like it had products that you could buy, and like they figured out how to do that. And unfortunately, it had a brief time in the sun. You know what? Maybe like 3 or 4 years before other people started doing other things.
Sure.
It laid the foundation for what became other web-based series and even beyond animated.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't even gone to their website in years. So I would assume it's still there, but I don't think they're making new episodes. And the big runaway success was Strong Bad Emails.
Yeah.
Like that was the mini series in that. But I mean, Homestar Runner, like you go there and they're using Flash to even build the website itself, and you could switch between different layouts for the website, and then all their videos had little Easter eggs inside that you could click on. happen, that to make other things happen. So like every video they would put out, you'd want to keep mousing over the screen because you wouldn't know what you'd be able to click on or not. At one point, they'd started doing collaborations with They Might Be Giants. And so one of my favorite They Might Be Giants films is called Independent Film, which they made the music video for, which is a fantastic song and a fantastic music video.
So it's funny because my week has been surrounded with They Might Be Giants information. So our friend Sean, massive They Might Be Giants fan, right? Like that's how I first got introduced to them. But I was listening to another podcast about Coraline, the movie, the Henry Selick film Coraline by Leica, stop motion. And the song in it that other father sings, like making up a song about Coraline, wasn't actually John Hodgman who voiced the character singing it. It's the lead singer of They Might Be Giants, who at the time they were making the Coraline stop motion film were also working with a theatrical group who were making a live action stage musical based off of Coraline, and they had written all the songs for it. They seem to me to be the type of group that there is really a massive potential. Like they want to explore mediums outside of just what they do, you know, like as a concert, right? Like they want to be more than just like here's a little tiny like red hat with our logo on it that you got at some underground concert that was promoted only through like box office tops or something like that. You know,
I'm flashing back now to all the other like the entertainment channels you could find on the internet back then, and I'm trying to find this one. I'm 99% certain it was called Robot Frank. Yeah. And it was a website that would do, but the only thing that I can pull up right now is the film Robot and Frank. Starring Frank Langella or Langella, and Susan Sarandon. But that was one where it was just still images, and they would tell like a new story of Robot Frank's life, and I loved it because it was just a guy in like a cardboard suit, and they built a whole universe for him. And then at one point he crossed over with another web celebrity named Emotion Eric, and I went to that website, and it might still exist, emotioneric.com, but it was called Eric Conveys an Emotion. And it started with, it's just some college kid. And he's like, hey, I've got a webcam. I'm going to take a still photo of you. Write in and tell me what emotion you want me to convey. And I'll take a photo of me conveying it. And then you can click it, right? And so it started with all the same ones. And then people started submitting more complicated stuff. And so he would take these comedic still shots of himself. And so he became kind of a web celebrity at that time too. Web comics were beginning to become a thing at that moment as well. Like people were really starting to explore the medium. And obviously now it's everywhere. I mean, the internet is media. All media just goes to the internet at this point. Which
is ironic because at the beginning of the internet, it was, well, we'll take what we're creating for newspapers and we need to populate stuff onto the internet now, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were finding things that existed in the real world and putting them into the digital world. And now the exact opposite is happening, where things that were born in the digital world, we're finding a way to put into the real world.
I forget who it was that I heard say this. It was on a recent Lex Friedman podcast where the guest said, it's always been that the old media or art would feed into the new media or art. So it used to be storytelling around the campfire, which fed into theater. Theater then fed into radio plays, which then fed into TV series and film, which then fed into now the internet, right? Mm. And so like all that previous stuff now goes to that new medium. But now you're right, now things are created just for the internet. And really, for it to even escape and go anywhere else is almost nonsensical, right? Because it's just going to go back into the internet again. So it's sort of a unification. I remember getting into it.
It's like the black hole of media, right?
I remember like 10 years ago or so getting into an argument with local radio host Chris Hansen.
Oh, yeah.
Because we worked in the same poker TV show. And I was like, eventually at some point, it's just going to be the internet. Like it's not going to be cable TV and this. It's all going to be the internet. He was like, that is the dumbest thing. That will never happen. Oh, I'm going to stop like paying for all my channels. I'm like, yeah, you are. Yeah. There will eventually it will just be one network. No, it's not. He was so adamant that was not going to happen. And I'm like, look at today, Chris.
Right. I think a huge
calling you out, Hambone.
When the FCC finally decided that they are going to officially say that the internet is a utility. and it falls under the same guidance that other utilities would. The same thing, the oversight that your power company has and that your water company. And you need the internet to live nowadays.
Yep.
You can't get away. Even if you're like, I don't have the internet at my house, which I'm surprised you're listening to this podcast if you don't have internet at your house. Right. But you do use the internet in some way. Do you have a smartphone in front of you? Oh, you don't have a smartphone in front of you? Okay, well, how did you file your taxes? I mean, the fact of the matter is that the internet has just become a tool that we use for everything.
And I mean, the internet is essentially now becoming the world computer, which I mean, so much of your computing can just be offloaded to cloud services. And eventually, I think it stands to reason that there really will no longer be a need for terrestrial wiring, right? Like all these old networks, the telephone network and cable TV networks and then internet networks require running cable across the land. And, we're going to probably have some variation of that for some period of time, but we are already sort of bathing the world in a wireless cloud. And eventually it just stands to reason that we'll stop buying. For most of us, will probably stop buying personal computers with its own processor and its own hard drive and RAM. It'll just be screens or of something that can access the world computer because everything will be kept there. Infinite backup, so it's nearly impossible to lose any of your devices. So like if I'm some kind of cable carrier or something, the real threat to my business is a Verizon.
Yep.
Or people who can already be like, if I go to a hotel these days, I don't sign up for the Wi-Fi at the hotel. I just turn on the Wi-Fi of my phone. It's infinitely more secure. So I'm not worried about someone like tapping into it. I'm already paying for the service. It's going to give me a better thing. I think eventually some variation of that is we're just bathed in access to the world computer.
Bingo.
And then we'll just be like, yeah, I have all these different ways I can access the world computer and offload. I don't own a PC. I own a Mac, but not a PC. And I play video games by renting a computer that is on the cloud and just streaming it to myself. More than likely, barring me suddenly making a shit ton of money all of a sudden, I'm not going to own a gaming PC just because by the time I could afford one, it doesn't make sense for me to do it now. I'm already getting everything I need for like $30 a month.
It used to be that you'd have like a giant tower at every workstation. Yeah. And now even the computer company said like, listen, we understand that you don't need this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sell you a box that's about a fifth of that size. And then it's all a network, right? Going back to a main hub and you can take care of it.
This phone that's in front of me is like so many more times orders of magnitude powerful than like the Pentium 4 we used to have.
Oh, yeah. Right. Home. It's all about the Pentiums, baby. Have you ever heard about the Google Loon project?
I think I have, but I'm blanking on what it is.
So it's a high altitude balloon that they wanted to do that essentially like
Google Loon?
Google Loon.
That's what okay, Google Loon.
That's a much better name than just Loon.
I mean, I thought that's what you were saying. It's the Google Loon.
No, it's the Google was starting a company called Loon.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's because balloon is a part of it.
Got it.
But so the idea was that like a water tower in rural areas, they would put these high altitude balloons that would have an umbrella effect with high speed internet.
Sure.
So like you said, running cabling. So that's we had huge projects that the U.S. government backed to run. In the last episode of JJMW, we talked about the railroad. The railroad is actually important because alongside the railroad, you would find telephone line, right? And telephone line followed that because it wasn't taking up extra space.
Well, at one point, that was what, telegraph line or for Morse code or whatever?
And we get into the trouble, though, where it's like, okay, so high-speed internet. Well, we can't just easily get high-speed internet to a town that's 40 miles from the nearest other town, 200 miles from the nearest metropolis. And so Google's like, yeah, well, we're going to create these high-altitude balloons, and we can do this. And at one point, I swear I heard that North Dakota was going to be like a beta test for it, which would have been genius,
that
right?
Makes sense because we're so flat.
Yeah.
So it's probably easier to cover the terrain.
And whoever the CEO of Microsoft or of Google, is obsessed with airships, like blimps. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
And he's been quoted as saying, I wish that one day I could darken the skies with Google blimps.
That is some heinous sounding shit.
Right?
I will blot out the sun.
But it makes me think, any idea that someone has had to bring the internet to areas that previously didn't have it. We're on cocktail napkins. And honestly, at one point someone said, listen, as cell providers, we already have this set up and ready to go. What if we take the next steps? Sure, there's going to be a massive amount of cash that we have to influx into this, but it's going to be a fraction of what it would take for a cable company.
And they're already sitting on billions of dollars to spend anyways. Right. But I mean, that's also what Musk's Starlink company is doing, right? Basically,
I have a coworker who uses Starlink at the lake.
Really? So yeah. I actually have never used the service before. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that really all you need is a mesh of satellites surrounding the Earth. And now that it's so much easier for companies to put satellites into orbit, I mean, it's a crazy time we are living through right now.
So,
and it's going to get crazier.
One way or the other. WALL-E.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Love WALL-E. I cried at WALL-E.
Me too. So my sister watched it for the first time. She's like, should I watch the movie Ants or WALL-E? And I'm like, watch WALL-E. It's friggin' amazing. It's beautiful.
And your sister cries at like Charmin commercials.
Right. So
WALL-E.
When I was talking to her about it, I said, one of the scenes that scared the shit out of me when I saw WALL-E was when he gets into the rocket with Eva to head to the spaceship now that she has like a plant inside of her, her mission. They blast through the atmosphere, and one of the things they do is they have to blast through essentially like a garbage site of satellites that surround our planet.
Yep.
And someone said, they're not entirely wrong. Like, that's a huge amount of space, but now that we've gotten to the point of where, like, any company who has the resources can launch satellites into space. And so if you're a telecom, you're like, oh, I think that we should have 10 satellites out there. You don't have to get permission.
No.
You launch those satellites. And at one point you have to wonder, like, who is going to start governing that type of idea?
I think my understanding is obviously you would have to get permission from the launch site itself. So like if you're launching from United States territory, but yeah, once you're in a certain level of orbit, no country can own that necessarily is my understanding as well. They do have like up-to-date digital maps online where you can see the amount of space garbage that's actually there, and it's insane. And I have been reading a little bit on companies that have been proposing solutions to clean it up, mostly of which what they do is they just say, okay, send it back into the atmosphere, and we're going to use the atmosphere to burn up the majority of that. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot of, hey, look, Mom, it's a shooting star. Nope, that's just McDonald's Fargo satellite. They're bringing it down because they need to put a new one up that's got 12G on it or something like that.
Do you think that there's a situation where you hear dad's home, and you run out and it's some kid whose dad is a garbage man, and he says, one day, Dad, I'm going to clean up the garbage of the space. And they both look up at the stars, kind of like the beginning of the first movie, Space Jam. And he goes, you'll do it, son. And he wants to be the first garbage man of outer space.
I believe I can fly. You know, I heard this a few years ago, but it makes sense that they would do it, that work is being done for suborbital flights from major cities to major cities, so that you could, in effect, travel from, say, New York to Hong Kong in like 30 minutes, something to that effect. And it's basically, you just got to go up to space first, because then you can go as fast as you want. And it's actually it's simple to get there. So that's something I think we'll be seeing in our lifetime. I would love to have, they've got that service right now. I haven't used it yet, but you can take a bus for like $30 from like Fargo to Minneapolis or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's
landline is what it's called.
Pretty routine, which I think that's a great service. That's a great cost for that.
Also, have you been on that bus?
No,
probably not.
No, I haven't.
It is ultra luxurious. It's got Wi-Fi in there. It's got charging ports. The seats are huge.
We've talked about it, but imagine if they put like a bullet train rail between Fargo and Minneapolis.
Okay,
like Fargo's this area's population would explode.
I have talked at length about the fact that, like, for Fargo it'd be a huge boon, but I also think like for Moorhead, right?
Absolutely.
And clearly, like Fargo, Moorhead, we're on either sides of a river, just separated by a little bit of geographical water flow. But
what a difference on either side.
A high-speed train where let's say there's one stop and it's in Alexandria, right? But you could get from Moorhead, Minnesota to downtown Minneapolis, even let's say like in an hour and 15 minutes, which speed trains like in Europe already do stuff like that. In Japan, they already do that. it would be such an enormous game changer for the state of Minnesota in being able to say, like, listen, you can actually, we now have the population possibilities where you can help establish. I guarantee you that Moorhead would triple its population in 3. I mean, you couldn't build houses fast enough for those people because there's enough people in Minneapolis who would be like, hour 15 minutes. I already spend an hour and a half driving from Eden Prairie to there.
Right.
I think that is just an awesome, good idea. And with mobile working nowadays, so let's say that there's a blizzard and the train, it's not going to operate today because of conditions. You just work from home that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I work in Minneapolis. I live in Moorhead, Minnesota.
Yep.
And I commute every day.
Do you know what it would do to being able, like, think about going to concerts? Like, this town, Taylor Swift was just in Minneapolis, and thousands of people left Fargo to go to that concert.
Yep.
The only downside is you don't have a vehicle there, but who needs it, right? Like, there's public transit once you get there. And if you really wanted, you could probably have a car that you keep in a parking garage, and you pay a monthly fee, and you get in there and you drive to work.
If they can solve autonomous driving, if they can really actually solve that too, you just get a rental for the day, and you might not even touch a steering wheel. I mean, so that those days are within reach within our lifetime, which is absolutely fascinating to me.
Would you? Okay, let me ask you something. Like, what's the thing that would make you say, "Ugh, I can't do that"? I'll give you 3 options. You can get into the speed train, but there's no bathroom, and so it constantly smells like people who had an accident. Number 2, you get on the speed train, but there's no seats because to make it profitable, they have to pack in as many people as they can. So for an hour and 15, you're standing and like holding on and bumping into other people and things like that. Number 3, you can get on the speed train, but once a year, a random passenger has to be sacrificed. It might be you, but the odds are very much against it because of the huge number of people. And the reason that someone has to be sacrificed is because the Ford Corporation is mad that you're taking away from all these people who would be driving their cars, that they require a blood sacrifice.
They've probably made a deal with a demon, which is what William Gibson in Neuromancer refers to as AI, is that the AI is actually the demon that's coming forth. And so that's a whole nother thing. I mean, options 1 and 3 both seem completely intolerable to me. So I think the worst one would be the random sacrifice. Just because I wouldn't want that to be going on. But also, if it's option number 1, I'm also not taking that train. I'm like, I don't need to go to Minneapolis. I'm good.
I need to
but, the standing, that's rough. But you know what? So is sitting in a car for 3.5 hours.
True.
And, it's better exercise on some level. Like, you can still find ways to rest a little bit. I've seen those workplace exoskeletons, like where you can just kind of sit and be your own chair. So I'm sure we see a prevalence of that kind of stuff, or even like single stand chairs that people are using to rest, or they're just, bringing their own camping chairs. Probably super dangerous.
If you got into one with a charismatic, like Music Man style, like leader who tells everyone, listen, if we all just start to sit at the same time, we will use the person behind you as the chair, and the person in front of you will use you as the chair. But the beauty is that we'll all be able to sit using the arc theory that was put together by the Romans.
Got it. I think it depends on the physical ability of everyone on that train, because there are going to be so many people that would not be able to, especially senior citizens, would just be like, I still can't do that. Like, I mean, or if you're a teeny tiny person behind someone who's just way bigger than you, like, yeah, but I'm still going to get fucked.
That's the
hard.
arch. The arch is supposed to take displace all. That's how they got the aqueduct.
It's so weird that we would have the technology for a 30-minute train ride, but we just can't handle chairs.
But isn't that kind of like the story of human beings in the 21st century, is that we can figure out how to get you on a vacation to the moon, but we can't make a microwave that lasts more than 4 years anymore.
I mean, there are trade-offs like that where I'm like, right, my phone can do math for me, and I don't remember how to do long division, but I'm okay with that. Like, that's okay. Like, I understand that I am less fit for my environment than, say, my ancestors a few generations ago. But at the same time, they were fighting off bears every day.
Right.
You
They're
know,
pooping in buckets.
they were like, I need to kill an animal and remove its flesh if my family is to have any protein this winter. Right.
Yep.
So I will take those trades, and we're going to keep making those trades as we go forward. But we're going to be offloading things to automated systems more and more and more.
You want to know something that you don't think of because your dad wasn't a hunter? My dad occasionally hunted stuff like pheasant, but like he was not a hunter.
No, my mom's family's a bunch of hunters.
Okay.
But yeah, my dad doesn't hunt.
You know what you need to ask your family about? Do they have like deer heads? Like, do they have like, buck heads and stuff like
no,
that?
we had like fish on the wall,
Yeah.
like prize catches. My uncles would like kill a deer, bring it to the cabin, and dress it there.
Okay.
But I don't really remember ever seeing taxidermied heads ever.
So I had a friend who had taxidermied heads, and I realized at one point, I'm like, wait a minute, you have to clean that. Mm-hmm. And so there are special vacuum attachments you get for cleaning like deer heads that still have fur on them and stuff like that. Otherwise, have you ever left something so long that the dust becomes kind of oily on it?
Yeah.
Like, you can't have that.
Nope.
And there are special shampoos where you can take it out to your backyard and be like, okay, let's hose this bad boy down.
Well, and they have to replace a lot of things that you just can't tax, like the eyes, and the tongue, I think, or things like that. Like a lot of things are just not going to be there forever. Have you ever been to, say...
Do you know why they use marbles for the eyes?
Because they look like eyes?
No, so that you can see your reflection back in them, and it makes it look lifelike versus something that's dull and dead.
Got it.
Which is crazy to me that at one point someone was like, they're like, Senor, why do the does look so dead? He's like, because they're not looking back at you.
Is that a Frenchman using senor?
I think it's a Spanish fur trapper talking to a French fur trapper.
Have you ever been to, say, like an antique shop or an oddity shop where they have some kind of taxidermy that has not been taken care of over the years?
Oh, yes.
Especially if it's like a muskrat or something. And so it looks like a nightmare. And you go, why do you have $100 price tag attached to this? Why is it not going in a fire somewhere?
Why is it not like, I'm going to give this to you just to get it out of here because it frightens the children?
Not want that anywhere fucking near me, but I never wanted taxidermy anything near me.
Right.
You know, I'm a meat eater. I'm not against the harvesting of animals for food, but to then go cut off its head and put it on the wall so we could look at it. I killed that one time, right?
That was me.
I'm not interested in. I don't understand why I would want that around.
My father-in-law does taxidermy. And he's a vegetarian, but I think he loves nature. And so when he stumbles upon something that has died,
he
will, and it's still in good shape. And people bring him stuff all the time, like fish that they've caught, things like that. And so when I first started dating Jill, I remember her parents went out of town for a week during the winter, and they're like, could you and JJ go up? Not you and JJ. Jill, would you go check on our house? And you can bring that boyfriend of yours.
These days, we hate JJ.
Bingo.
Can you please do this?
Jill and I decided, why don't we make like a little romantic night in the country together, and we'll go up to your parents' place and we'll watch a movie and we'll, get a frozen pizza, but it will be all alone, like up in the old country house in the middle of the winter. And I'm like, that sounds great, right?
Get up to no good.
So we get up there and Jill is taking a nap on the couch. I believe we're watching the movie The 13th Warrior, starring Antonio Banderas, which is a slight play off of the Beowulf story. Mm-hmm. So her mom had left a note saying like, hey, there's this and there's ice cream in the freezer if you want. And they had a big chest freezer in the back utility room. And so I get up and I'm like, I'm going to get myself a nice little cool ice cream treat. So I go back there and they have a huge chest freezer and I'm kind of digging around. And there's a black garbage bag in there. And I'm like, what the hell is this weird black garbage bag? And I touch it and I'm like, is this some kind of like really thin strip steak? Like what? And we're talking like a garbage bag size.
Yeah.
And suddenly Jill comes reeling around the corner. She goes, don't look at the garbage bag. I said, what? And she goes, never look in any bag that is in the freezer here. And I said, why? And she goes, because it's probably something that my dad got that's for taxidermy. But if you can't get to it right away, you got to keep it frozen.
Right.
And I said, oh my God. So then I realized, like, I am touching the neck of a swan, like a tundra swan,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
Or a goose, if you will. And that really grossed me out. And so I couldn't enjoy my ice cream treat. But, I have seen Pete does excellent work when it comes to taxidermy. And one time I went up there and all the electricity was off and they're out of town because a squirrel had gotten zapped on the transformer, and we found the squirrel and he was in a state of shock. Like wasn't expecting this. And so the guy we were with, who's a friend of theirs, who we said, like, hey, listen, the power's off. We need some help. I don't know how to navigate, I don't know who we call to come and replace the transformer or whatever. And he's like, oh, Pete will want this. And so he puts just the squirrel, not in a bag or anything, just right in the garage freezer. Right in there. There you go. And then he goes, oh, I went back and I reposed it so that it looks like it maybe got in there and then got lost, got stuck. So make sure to tell your parents to check the freezer when they get home. And I said, this is more dead animal contact than I've ever wanted in my life.
So I can one up your taxidermy story.
Please tell.
I recently finished filming AJ Goes to the Dog Park with Toby Jones, right? And on one of the last days of filming, we shot a little bit out in the countryside at his aunt and uncle's cabin. Beautiful house. And as I'm walking up, I look up at the outside of the house, and like one of like the windows on the upper level, I can see what looks like an animal. I'm like, Toby, what's up there? He goes, oh, you need to come see this. So they have a taxidermied boar fighting a baboon. And this is what it looks like.
What? Oh my God.
This is, I'm showing JJ right now. I'm reaching across the desk and showing him this photo.
It looks like a scene out of The Lion King.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's in immaculate condition. Oh. And apparently they found it.
It's huge.
They found it like auction somewhere, and they were like, well, we need this. And so I'll post this. I bet we can use this for our thumbnail.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll use it for the thumbnail. But
that is friggin' crazy.
Right. And I guess it's been like a family heirloom for a while. And so someone's going to get the boar fighting the baboon. And I mean, this is not something that would have happened in North Dakota.
Right.
This is a whole other country is having this fight, or a zoo.
It's not an upper Midwest baboon that you see roaming across the prairie or anything like that. Good God almighty. Oh, well, to each his own.
Right? I cannot imagine a single dead creature I would like to then pose in my home. No, I just wouldn't want that. And I love fishing. I love to go fishing, but I eat my fish, or I let them go. I don't then go, you know what? I'm going to get you calcified or whatever it is they do, and I'm going to put you up here on the wall so I can look at you and be like, yep, I killed that once.
You ever watch Tales from the Crypt?
Hell yeah.
Let me tell you about one of my favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes. It is an elderly couple, and the gentleman has just retired. Okay, and he's bored out of his mind. And his wife has been living this life at home. She's a homemaker. And so she feeds the neighborhood animals and like little cats and stuff like that. And he is now finding out that this is what she's doing during the day. And he's pissed that she's feeding all these animals and he doesn't care about the animals and the environment. And this is ridiculous. And so one day he's trying to figure out like what his hobby's going to be. And this cat wanders into the garage and he kills the cat. And taxidermies the cat.
What?
And the wife is like, Mittens trying, and she's like, do you know what happened to Mittens? He goes, nope, I don't know. And he goes, but I have a surprise for you. And he brings the cat around and he goes like, see, isn't this great? Now you don't have to feed it and it won't, be pooping on my newspaper and all this, but he's like this. And she's like, oh my God, how could you? And he goes, it's just a cat. And so he does it to another animal of hers, and the reveal at the end of the episode, because Tales from the Crypt is known for its reveals.
I feel like I see where this is going.
Their friend comes over and he goes like, how's Harold? She's like, good. He finally found like a hobby that he likes. And she turns him around and she has taxidermied her husband. And she's put like these red light up, like blinking eyes, like in him and stuff like that. It's messed up.
Harold deserved it though.
He did deserve
he
it.
was hurting his wife. Like, why would you do that to her?
And he was played like you'd recognize the actor instantly if you saw him. I don't know how familiar you are with the movie Camp Nowhere.
I mean, you're not talking Christopher Lloyd.
No. But I'm talking about like the repo guy who's trying to get Christopher Lloyd's car.
I'd have to look at it again.
Okay, yeah.
It's been a very long. I can tell you what the cover of Camp Nowhere looks like right now. But
Christopher Lloyd tied up.
Yeah, to like a pole or whatever, and all the kids are looking out from behind him.
We haven't had a good camp movie in a while. Oh, also, news came out on Friday that Alan Arkin passed away at age 89. Yeah. Alan Arkin. Now, an interesting fact about Alan Arkin, he was a member of the Second City right when it actually became the Second City, right after it transitioned out of the Compass Players. He has this huge improv background.
I had no idea about him.
Yeah, he does a great, he does two sketches I can think of right off the top of my head that I've seen. One is where he is a pitcher for the Cubs, and it's all done with him just like there's someone overhead on a mic being like, all right, number 38, blah, 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 pitching at the first, and of course, he's got his signature chew in his mouth, and then he does like a big spit, so he's miming what's going over this thing, and you can tell every night they change it, so he's got to like figure out he's gonna throw it, and he's dropped the ball, everyone. And it's really great, and it's an exercise in listening, right? That's just wonderful. 2 is Barbara Harris. Do you know who Barbara Harris is? Mm-mm. So she, in the original Freaky Friday that has Jodie Foster in it from like the 70s or 60s, she plays the mom. She was in Nashville, a Robert Altman film. Barbara Harris was sort of like the it girl, and then just decided she was going to walk away from Hollywood and acting. It's kind of amazing. So Barbara Harris was also a Second City person, and she is in this museum, and she's looking at art, and she's looking at this little like walk around pamphlet, and Alan Arkin's sitting there, and all of a sudden he pulls out a guitar, and he's like, the government, you can't trust the government. And she walks over and she goes, excuse me, but if you don't quiet down, they're going to kick you out of here. And they have this back and forth, and it's called like The Beatnik and the Debutante. And it is such an amazing sketch because they find out that they have so many things that are similar, yet so many things that are different about the two of them. It is, when it comes to sketch comedy, like you don't see stuff like that nowadays.
Right.
It was all about social commentary, and it was not done in, a bombastic way. It was done in a way that made you think about things like, who do you identify with this? Do you identify with the beatnik or the debutante? And what what can they learn from each other about like what really is life? And it's a great sketch. He also has one of my favorite all-time roles, which is he plays the father in The Slums of Beverly Hills, which is a movie that stars Natasha Lyonne, who went on to do great things. She's on that show on Peacock now, and she was in Orange is the New Black. But I'm a Cheerleader is another great movie with her. But it's a movie that's set back in the 70s, and it's about a deadbeat dad who keeps like moving, like essentially like not paying rent and then moving his family in the middle of the night, and the mother has long since died, and he wants to stay in Beverly Hills so that they still have the zip code of Beverly Hills. And he tells a great story about like this restaurant he used to run where someone was stealing steak from him, and like he's such a great actor. And he, of course, wins the Academy Award for Little Miss Sunshine, where he plays the grandfather.
Beautiful role.
The speech that he gives Abigail Breslin when she's asked if she's ugly, and he goes, "You're the most beautiful girl in the world." I think that's what
we all thought of when we found out that he passed away, because that really is just one of his peak moments. And then, of course, he dies in the movie, and they have to put him in the trunk. Right.
Which, the movie Vacation does the same thing with Aunt Edna. I think a good
Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah, and Weekend at Bernie's, too.
There should always be a corpse nearby if you're going to make a comedy.
Weekend at Bernie's and Weekend at Bernie's 2 has to happen within like the same 3-day period, because he never really seems to...
It's a matter of 6 days.
It's a matter of 6 days.
So, it's 6 days from the end of Weekend at Bernie's to the beginning of Weekend at Bernie's 2, because his corpse...
Yeah.
Has not even been like, they haven't even like flushed out the bodily fluids and replaced it with formaldehyde.
Rigor mortis never seems to set in.
Oh, it does in Weekend at Bernie's too.
Oh, that's right. That's right. But yeah, and then of course they use voodoo to reanimate the body. Yep. And so there's some supernatural elements to it. I would love a new week, like the Weekend at Bernie's 3. But is he still with us?
Do you know the guy who played Bernie is the guy who wrote those movies?
Right. Yeah.
And he's got an idea for Weekend at Bernie's 3.
I didn't. Oh God, I need that.
Do you know? Okay, so
I need that, and it really needs to be like Wet Hot American Summer, where they don't acknowledge the fact that all the actors are way older.
Way older. One of my favorite little things that I stumbled upon on the internet is the fact that in Weekend at Bernie's 2, every time he hears music, he like the corpse like reanimates, right? And then when music stops, he just goes back to being a corpse. But the thing he does is like he like stands up, and then his like back arches, and his head kind of bobs side to side, and so they called it doing the Bernie, and it became a dance craze for a while, so much so that like major league teams were hiring this guy to come and lead like a crowd of like 5,000 people to do the Bernie together.
I just remember like taking a road trip at one point. Like whenever Dad would take us on a road trip, we'd go to Videoland and he'd rent like 20 movies and then put this little mini TV in the back, and so we could always watch movies. And the Weekend at Bernie's films were always in the rotation. What is it, Baby's Day Out?
Yeah,
where it's the little baby across New York or whatever. My Girl 2 for some reason.
Oh,
was
not
always,
the first, but the second
My
one?
Girl 2 was
Where
always
she
in the
has
rotation.
her sexual awakening in L.A.
Yep. Caddyshack, which we were like,
oh my
"There's
God."
boobs in it. And I can't believe Dad's letting us watch it. And like when the boobs would come on, we would just stop saying anything. So that, the Cannonball Run films were always in there.
Your dad was all over the fucking minefield on
Yep,
this, because Weekend at Bernie's is not appropriate for young kids.
No.
A woman has sex with his dead corpse.
Yep. Yep. Ace Ventura 1 was always in the mix. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of mostly raunchy comedies is what we were watching all the time. And he and my stepmom at the time would just be in the front.
They're like, this is great. We don't have to listen to them.
Oh, my God. It's so good. Yep. And so I watched a lot of movies in the car on road trips. That's where I would see films.
My mom had a van called the Waldock, and it was essentially like a van you could probably live in if you wanted, where the back end folded all the way down.
So this is the actual brand name. It's not like you all decided to call it the Waldock.
No, yeah. In fact, we called it the Titanic because my mom constantly was hitting shit with it because the van itself was so big. But it had a built-in little TV and VCR that was between the like captain seat and the co-captain seat. Gotcha. And we loved it, and it was great until like a year into it, the tape for Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, got stuck in there, and you could rewind it and you could play it, and that was fine, but you couldn't get it out. Like the eject button had like stopped working.
Okay.
And we just weren't bringing it in to get serviced, or if they were like, yeah, it's going to be, we got to get someone from Sight on Sound over here to deal with that. And so we just would watch that movie on repeat. We finally got rid of that van. It was when I was in 8th grade. I will remember this forever. It was the last week of school for 8th grade, and we were part of a carpool, and my mom's van stunk so bad. Like, you would have to like roll down every window and like put your head out of the van. It stunk like something, like an animal had died in it, right? And so finally, my mom, after like a week of this, was like, we got to figure out what's stinking up this car. This is ridiculous, and pulling stuff out. At one point, she had gone to the grocery store and loaded up a ton of groceries, and a package of pork chops had gotten like out of a bag and wedged under this back seat. So in May heat, beating down on this van had been rotting pork chops, and they had probably been there for like a week before we started to really smell that they were rotting. And then finally my dad was like, Pat, we got to get rid of this van. This is just... And she had at one point had been leaving the clinic and wasn't paying attention. And she ended up getting it stuck on a boulder. Like, she got the front part up and it was so long that it was teetering back and forth on a boulder. And so we had to get like 4 people to like push it. And you could hear... She had also, at that time, run over part of their landscaping, which was a pine tree. So as she was trying to rock it back and forth herself, she was heating up the undercarriage, and it smelled like Christmas because she was burning pine, essentially.
Yep.
The Waldock.
Oof. The Waldock.
Yeah.
R.I.P. the Waldock.
Yeah, right? Big time.
Road trips back
I think my parents lost their shirts on that van.
Well, and now every road trip, each kid has their own TV that's connected to the world computer.
Which is amazing.
In their pocket, right in front of them, which is so crazy. I mean, they could get so much porn. They could see much dirtier stuff than we were watching on VHS.
Right.
There's a scene, and I can't remember. I think it's Cannonball Run 1, where like Jackie Chan is trying to watch Behind the Green Door in their car, like getting exposed to that as a kid. That's the kind of stuff that we would get accidentally exposed to by our parents, was from raunchy comedies. But my sister has a friend, Brittany, whose mom would let her watch every single horror film you've ever seen ever. And so like it was weird, like the kind of things that as a kid you would get exposed to. I think I saw a meme once of like me and my sister watching, the Jason movie where he's smashing a camper's head open against a tree, and they're both like 5-year-olds and they're just watching popcorn, not being watched by their parents. And it's like the same generation that wanted the movie rating system was the same generation that would just put any movie on in front of you and then walk away.
Yeah. I should not have been watching Who Framed Roger Rabbit at the age I was.
No, my mom would always go, okay, I'm going to rent movies for my kids, but I'm going to make sure it's appropriate. So I'm going to rent Disney films, right? She would rent live action Disney films. So that's how I watched the one and only Genuine Original Family Band and a bunch of stuff like
$1 Million Dachshund.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Herbie the Love Bug. But
I hate to get technical on you, but the Robert and oh god, I can't remember the boys, the two guys who wrote all the songs for all the Disney movies, the Sherman Brothers, get real pissed when people say Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is a Disney movie. It is not. Do you know who produced that movie?
No.
Cubby Broccoli, who's the guy who had the rights to all the James Bond movies.
Okay.
And he had gotten sick of making James Bond movies and wanted to make something for families. And so he got the Sherman Brothers to do Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I just corrected somebody else about that this week. And I said, I don't mean to be prickly because it's rude when people correct, but I think it's important because a lot of people do say, oh, it's one of the crowning achievements of Walt Disney. And it's like, because it's got Dick Van Dyke, It's got Sherman Brothers songs.
Yeah.
It's from that era when like Disney was the only one making family entertainment.
Does Disney own it now?
No.
They don't? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a false memory of then even recently seeing it on VHS with the Disney logo on it. So thank you for that correction. Because it's easy to mistake it for, Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, right?
Bingo, right?
That kind of thing. One of my favorite movies growing up. But one time, Mom, because like on Friday night, if we were at Mom's house, we'd get a frozen pizza and we'd watch a Disney film. And sometimes because Mom would teach dance classes sometimes at night for like the college. And so Brianna and I would just get to have a movie and eat pizza. Mom be gone for an hour or two and come back. One night she finds a live action version of Pocahontas. And she's, oh, Pocahontas. It's not a Disney one, but she's like, oh, but this is totally fine. The Disney one had come out, I think, already at that point. This was one that had been produced like 10 years previous. And so Mom puts the movie on and we get our Tombstone pizza or Moose Brothers pizza or whatever it was. And then she goes to teach her dance class. And halfway through the movie, there's a scene where Pocahontas and John Smith decide to just get busy on the beach. And seeing a topless Pocahontas as a kid, I was like, what? What? And so like I would always ask, like, can we rent Pocahontas again?
And your mom was like, oh, he's really getting into, studying the culture.
Yeah, this was back when you could still rent videos from Hornbachers in North Fargo.
Yeah.
And the case would be on the shelf and it would have a little circular tag underneath it. And you'd bring the tag up to the front and get that film. That's how I saw some really adult anime stuff.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was a cartoon about samurais. And I mean, it was. But I mean, it was like murderous and there was just raw sexuality and everything in it. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. And my mom thinks it's just a simple cartoon.
I remember as a kid watching Animal House way before I should have been. I remember getting in big trouble because my best friend growing up, his mom owned a preschool. And so when she was getting stuff ready for the preschool, sometimes we'd, if I was sleeping over his house, we'd have to go over there for a couple hours and like hang out. And they had a TV and VCR on a cart. And so we were hanging out like playing with like the trains, right, that are meant for little kids, but we're older. And I was like, hey, what we should watch is Weird Science. And so we rented Weird Science. And I remember Isla being like, I think this is a movie for older boys. And I'm like, I've seen it. I've seen it. But juxtaposed like watching Weird Science while you're sitting in a preschool. Yeah, that feels weird. So
Man, you see, aren't you nostalgic for VHS now, JJ?
I am.
After talking about all this?
In fact, I was just today watching a clip because Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has come out, and people are very nostalgic about old Indiana Jones, and someone had a Betamax, but it's something I had never seen before. Betamax teamed up with Sony to make a self-encompassed Betamax player projector that all you had to do is plug it in.
I believe Betamax was owned by Sony.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I believe it was Sony's technology.
And so this was called like the video drone or something like that. And so you could take this thing wherever you want. It is massive. And like the guy who puts it up on a shelf, like you can tell like it hurts. And so he plugs it in, pulls down a screen, and he's watching it, and of course it's got built-in speakers so you can hear the like crappy sound that comes out of the speakers. But it's the idea is that take movies wherever you want to go, as long as you've got access to power and you've got a projection surface that's pretty white. But watching it and like hearing, the VHS wobble of like sound, like when it comes to sound, I got real nostalgic while watching this clip of the, hearing the like.
I have one Betamax player. I haven't tested it yet to see if it works. And I have one movie on beta, which is Yentl.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's the CBS Fox release of Yentl. And that's the only one I've got right now. But at some point this summer, my garage is filled with old decks that I want to sell either for parts or if they work to, collectors, because they're actually pretty nice decks. But the Betamax one I'm going to keep for myself if I can get it to work, because that would be my one Betamax player. But yeah, I mean, that was that was the first format war, really, when it came to what will exist, VHS or beta. It's similar in scope to, is it going to be Blu-ray or HD DVD?
Yeah.
It was these companies that were and it ended up being usually tied into what is available on it. Can you make things exclusive on this one platform or not? And so, yeah, VHS ended up beating beta. My understanding was that you could get better image fidelity on Betamax, but you can only fit like an hour or so in the cassette. But there's long stories about how those things went down. But it's usually between competition. So, which is why Sony really ended up fucking crushing it with the PlayStation 2.
Yep.
Was because they were like, well, let's put a DVD player in there. So like all these format wars and all of these media player wars really came over like what's going to be available on that thing.
Yeah, I remember when I had the Xbox 360, Xbox went all in on HD DVD, not putting it inside. Like, you used to play regular DVDs, but if you wanted the high def, you had to buy a standalone player. And so I bought the HD DVD player, and because I was like, I'm gonna back HD DVD, and because of they had the rights to one thing, right? Like one studio had gone all in. I think Universal maybe went all in on it, and I wanted like Nutty Professor in ultra high definition.
Of course you did.
And so I actually
gotta get my clumps.
I just looked at it recently and I was like, oh, what a waste of money. And we're talking about, I invested in this thing, and then it was like 3 months later, they're like, we're giving up the ghost.
Yeah.
And then Best Buy was like, hey, we're still selling these at like $20 a pop. Okay, we're selling these for $10 a pop. Okay, if you buy anything, we'll give you like a handful of Zach and Miri Made a Porno, DVDs.
I still see them on the shelves at pawn shops because they're easily mistaken for something that you can actually play on something. I believe I have one of the seasons of Sopranos on HD DVD because I didn't look close enough at the label when I bought the damn thing.
Let's bring this thing full circle with talking about The Simpsons at the beginning of this. One of the best gags is there's an episode where the Simpsons are being robbed by Snake. He comes into their house and he steals their VHS player, and he gets out of the house and he goes, oh no, Beta. And he had stolen a Betamax player instead of a VHS player. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. I remember I got a free copy of King Kong on HD DVD. And even if they had won the war, I wouldn't watch it still.